it is official. Deshaun Watson is back in the NFL after 23 months away from the game, after settling the same number of lawsuits, 23, filed against him by women alleging sexual misconduct. After serving his 11-game suspension, it was agreed upon as a settlement between his legal team and the NFL. Deshaun Watson is back, and a couple of big questions surrounding his return. I've gone into the legal and moral side of this a lot on my radio show, on my podcast. We don't need to rehash all of that now or delve deeper into it. This is going to be mostly about football. I'll give you a warning. There's a little bit of profanity just from some audio that I'm playing. None by yours truly. I'm pristine. I don't cuss, baby. So there are two big questions. One, how is he going to perform? How is the rust going to be knocked off of him, so to speak? The other big question is, what's the reception going to be by the fans, by Tony Busby, who represented most of the women who filed lawsuits against Deshaun Watson. He has said that he'll be there with 10 women or so who had been accusers of Deshaun Watson. That would presumably be 10 women who have also settled with Deshaun Watson, so I don't think they're going to be making any statements at the game. And then I think the big thing is also just what is Deshaun going to look like in this Kevin Stefanski offense. And look, I played for Gary Kubiak. I played against Gary Kubiak. I have always been a huge admirer of the Kubiak-Shanahan system, and this Stefanski offense is inspired by that system, runs a lot of the same themes and elements. He's got his own tweaks like everybody does. But I think, to put it bluntly, it's going to be really, really good for Deshaun. So, the reception. Let's tackle that first, because I stumbled upon a show on YouTube that I actually really like. It's the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. They're on from 11 to 1. I'll link them in the comments below. This is what they said, and they make some really good points here, and I like these guys, but they're flat out wrong about a couple of things. Let's hear what they said.
I want to ask you guys about something Tim said. Tim said he thinks it's the perfect scenario for Deshaun Watson because he's playing a team in the Houston Texans that's got one victory on the season. Yeah. On one hand, yes, you want them to go against a team that talent-wise you feel you should be able to handle. But we can't not talk about the other part of
That's
this.
going to be a tough atmosphere.
So Deshaun, wherever he goes, is going to get the Michael Vick treatment.
Yes.
But it'll be nothing like what he gets in Houston because, remember, he tapped out there. He told the team, I don't want to be here with you guys. Right. So the players have that fuel.
Yeah.
And the fans also. Imagine if we had Deshaun Watson here, and next season he tells us, I can't win here, I'm leaving.
Right. So,
how angry we would be.
So let me tell you.
Okay. Excellent points. Honestly, a couple things. One, yes, it's true. You are going against a Texans defense that is very bad. I think they have made some genuine improvements against the run in the last couple of weeks, but Cleveland is running the ball very, very well. So that part is 100% true. As far as Deshaun quitting on the team, yes, it's a good point. The thing about the Texans right now that people wouldn't realize is that there are only 8 guys on this roster who actually played on the same field alongside Deshaun Watson. There's been a purge of players off this team. So I don't think that there are that many guys left who played with Deshaun who would have the capability of feeling offended by it. The other thing is that a lot of the guys of those 8 are still friendly with Deshaun Watson, or at least don't bear any grudge against him. It was a mess when Deshaun first asked out. And the other thing that I think people would be surprised by is that my co-host Sean Pendergast and I polled our listeners a lot on this. Immediately after Deshaun asked for the trade in January of 2020, most Texans fans were actually on Deshaun's side because there'd been so much dysfunction and so much weirdness with the Texans that people understood why he might want out. This was before any of the sexual assault allegations. And then as things progressed, as Deshaun put the kibosh on a trade here, it was difficult there. He fell out of favor, and now it's a pretty heavy majority of people that are anti-Deshaun. But in terms of the atmosphere and environment, I don't think it's going to be as raucous and as nasty as people in Cleveland might be envisioning, mostly because of this. It's a numbers issue. Texans fans are checked out on this team. A lot of home games this year have felt almost like it might as well have been an Eagles game. That game, the Eagles game, was a special case because the Astros were playing a World Series game on that same night. So you walk around the stadium, and there were a lot of Eagles fans, and then a lot of orange-clad Astros fans too. That was on our Battle Red Day, by the way. So it's been that kind of year. So just by sheer numbers, I don't think it's going to be quite as vocal, quite as loud as you might think. I think, too, maybe something that might be more accurate is what happened in Jacksonville in the preseason, which sounded like this. A little bit of profanity coming up.
You sick fuck! 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 You sick fuck!
I think they were saying Juszczyk sucks. They hate Kyle Juszczyk, these guys. They hate the fullbacks in general, apparently. No, that's a preseason game versus Jacksonville. Browns fans remember that. It didn't look all that great for Deshaun Watson as a quarterback on that day either. That's where a lot of the rust talk comes from, I think, and understandably so. This is the thing that on the field there, I doubt that sounded all that impressive. I think sometimes in an empty stadium, it can penetrate a little bit more because players can hear individual insults. I've played in the dog pound before, in front of the dog pound, not in the, God no, I wouldn't go in the dog pound. I've played and warmed up in front of the dog pound. The dog pound sucks mostly during warm-ups because it's just you and the defensive line doing drills in a corner where there's not a whole lot of crowd noise, so the specific insults cut right through and get to you. But for the most part, usually the people that are most vocal are also really, really drunk, so they're not as witty as somebody else you might deal with. I'd rather battle wits with a dog pound member, a drunken dog pound member, than a sober, acerbically witted seventh grader. The other thing, too, is I'm a little bit biased because when you tell a Houstonian, hey, we're expecting a really rough reception, you got to remember, we've watched the Astros for 2 years now. This is what we're accustomed to in a non-full stadium, by the way, as we watch one of our most beloved athletes and a man who did not participate in the cheating scandal, Jose Altuve, at the plate. Now, the one thing I will tell you, and I'll try to prepare Cleveland fans for this, prepare yourself to hear the same 6 jokes over and over and over again all season long. That's what the Astros have had to do for 2 years. And one thing you'll learn, too, is that a lot of the people making the insults, you can tell, don't actually follow baseball all that much. They'll say things like, well, it's a lot harder to hit the pitch when you don't see what's coming. The Astros have actually hit the ball pretty well. And you hear the same thing. So Deshaun's going to hear a lot of the same insults, the same jeers. Over time, I think people just get callous to it. There's going to be a ton of towels and towel jokes at the stadium. And along those lines, I think one of the things that I don't know about, I know a whole lot about my team getting booed. I don't know quite what to make of the fact that Tony Busby is going to be there with 10 of the women who have accused who did accuse Deshaun Watson of sexual misconduct. It's ironic, I think, that it was in the presidential debate between Trump and Hillary Clinton. The one in Houston was the one where Trump showed up with a couple of the women who had accused Bill Clinton of sexual misconduct. And I'd love to make the very popular move of getting into a discussion about Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton right now and how that might have affected anybody's psyche. But we'll move on to this. Deshaun is pretty good at compartmentalizing. I think that's something that we saw here in Houston. And it's obviously a different type of issue that he's going to be compartmentalizing himself or separating himself from. But I think like a lot of issues that athletes have, no matter how you feel about them as people or what they may or may have not have done, they're pretty good at separating the outside world from the world in between the lines. And I do also think, too, there is an element of going into a hostile environment. And again, I understand this is completely different than, playing football and going up to Buffalo and Buffalo being mean to everybody just for football reasons. But there is something about a hostile environment that kind of drives you to focus that much more. And I also think that, people have mentioned, hey, maybe Deshaun will somehow, be eager to prove himself against this crowd or, to stick it to the Texans somehow. He's never seemed to me like a guy who's motivated by a chip on his shoulder. He's not a Baker Mayfield. He doesn't, maybe he saves old tweets of people criticizing him and uses them as motivation. He uses the word legendary a lot. I think you guys might find that out up in Cleveland at some point. So I think he's motivated more by chasing greatness than he is in proving people wrong. You don't hear him talk about it a lot in press conferences or anything. So I think for the most part, the challenge, and this would be backed up by how Kevin Stefanski was talking about it and what Deshaun said on Thursday in the presser, is that he's trying to stay focused on simply playing football. Okay, on to the purely football stuff. And this is where I think Deshaun Watson is going to end up being very, very good in this offense. Like I said, I played for Gary Kubiak. Before I played for Gary Kubiak, I played against his offenses for 5 years. And I can honestly remember wondering why not everybody was running offense the way the Broncos did back at the time that he was the offensive coordinator of the Broncos. Because it just, when executed properly, it's like the crane kick. No can defend. That's exactly what that zone scheme is. Now, things have changed over the years. They've had to add on to it and change it because the cut blocking rules aren't what they used to be. They used to be able to do some dirty, nasty stuff to you that they can't get away with anymore. So Kyle Shanahan, Gary Kubiak, and others have honed it, improved on it. Sean McVay, they all add their own little wrinkles to it. But when you execute it properly, it just flat out works. This is what I found very, very, very interesting this offseason because Kevin Stefanski, without me even knowing it until I read about this in The Athletic, Kevin Stefanski addressed an issue with Deshaun Watson while they were courting him in free agency I guess before the trade. They addressed something that had bothered me about Deshaun for a couple years and that Deshaun had worked on and gotten better at. But here's the article from The Athletic in which Deshaun, to his credit, was asking Stefanski for advice on things that he could improve. He asked Stefanski if he saw anything Watson could work on. Stefanski rattled off a list of a few items, including doing a better job of carrying out his fakes. Watson laughed and said Stefanski sounded like Watson's 10th grade coach, who always got on him for that kind of thing. This is 100% something that used to drive me crazy about Deshaun. He got better in his last year in Houston, but he was never the sleight of hand artist that a lot of guys like Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen are in terms of deception in the backfield. And if you're going to run the option game, if you're going to run old school Kubiak Shanahan bootleg, this is something that they harped on forever. Before the zone read was ever a thing in the NFL, Kubiak and Shanahan were driving home the importance of executing the fake properly, holding the backside defender by faking, after you hand the ball off, faking like you're running with it. And I'll just show you a couple examples of Deshaun where these are not egregious examples, but imperfect examples of Deshaun trying to execute fakes. And part of this, too, I'm going to say is I think the Texans' offense under Bill O'Brien was never adept at actually executing this kind of stuff. The attention to detail was not what it needed to be to have a genuinely great run offense. And some of that hurt Deshaun in ways that were beyond his control because I think the offense had tells that weren't just Deshaun in whether or not he was executing a fake properly. So if you watch this play here, you're going to see Deshaun fake and just kind of keep running straight backwards without really executing any kind of a boot. doesn't really matter on this play, but it's a matter of doing it every time. He's just running straight back instead of making it look like he's going to run a bootleg. He's got to get out of that habit. And I think by the end of this season, he did to a large degree, because this game, the Steelers game, this was really bad for Tells, because the Steelers held the Texans to 1.9 yards per carry. This was early in the 2020 season. And when they blitzed at times off the corner, defensive backs who typically will come like bat out of hell for the quarterback no matter what, because they only get so many chances at a sack, they were zeroing in on the running back. So the attention to detail just wasn't there that you get in a well-executed Kubiak-Shanahan offense. I think that kind of stuff will change with Deshaun when he's in Houston, and that's one of the reasons I think they'll end up doing a really good job. Here's another one where you can see, you watch the edge defender on the left defensive line for the Titans as he does two things. One, he's reading the block, this kick-out block that's coming towards him, but he's also very, very clear that instead of butting that guy up and keeping an outside arm free in case he has to chase the quarterback, he just cuts it inside. He's not concerned about the quarterback run at all. So there are times when Deshaun was running the RPO with the Texans where it just it wasn't a genuine option game, and that's not uncommon in the NFL. There's times where they make it look like option, but it wasn't. But I think it was too obvious to defenders when it wasn't. Having said all that, Deshaun did have success sporadically with the RPO, especially in 2019 and 2020. They never really built on it or added enough elements to offset the defense. Defenses tended to get a beat on it, and it never developed into quite what we hoped it could be here. If you're a Browns fan, I think what you hope is that Kevin Stefanski is able to take something, that Deshaun has that Jacoby Brissett and Baker Mayfield do not have, which is surreal athleticism and a knack for not just running, but understanding the flow of the defense and really taking his RPO game to the next level. Plus, he never had a David Njoku. You're not going to see anybody like David Njoku on these clips right here as he explains how the Texans were running RPO to Kurt Warner and Brian Baldinger. I thought these guys did a great job breaking this down.
Guys did an unbelievable job with this naked game that you had. You had a great feel for it. You did it in different ways. Just talk me through this a little bit.
It just starts with the run game. With Carlos Hyde and Duke Johnson of really getting like 3 or 4 yards of carry. And then if you include my zone read ability of keeping the ball, it brings up the linebackers and it studied them. And so I don't know if I'm keeping it, if it's a play action, if it's a zone read. So
plus you're big with these two tight ends.
Right, exactly.
Akins and Phelps.
Yeah, and they can really sell if they're blocking and then slip by, like in this situation. Once I see that he out-leveraged, just give it to him.
Just give it to him every time.
Give it to him early.
Watson fakes the give, throws it to Akins. He's got the first down.
It looks like a play action, but really it's a zone. I can hand it off.
So what they mentioned there, too, with what the tight ends can do, these are one of these little nuances that need to be coached up really well. When the tight end makes it look like he's blocking for an inside run, but then he's able to slip out and go out on a route, all these little things, they put a lot of stress on a defense. And I don't think that the Browns, I would be surprised if the Browns do a whole lot of that for the Texans game, because, frankly, the Texans are one of the very worst run defenses in the NFL. They've made some progress the last couple weeks. Miami was a little out of skew because Mike McDaniel just kept throwing the ball. He didn't care. They had a 30-0 lead. He just kept throwing the ball. He wants to pass. He's a genius. We're not sure if he's genius, or is he like, okay, he's a genius for a little while and then people figure him out. But right now, they just weren't interested in running the ball. The Texans' run defense has improved a little bit. They're fitting their runs better. Their linebackers have played somewhat better. But Christian Harris, the rookie linebacker out of Alabama, was injured last week. We'll see how much he plays or how effective he is this week, but I think he's been a difference in these last few weeks in being better versus the run. But to start out with, I would be really, really surprised if Deshaun Watson even throws the ball all that much to begin with this year. Here's a little bit more in this game at least, because this is the tack that most teams have taken versus the Texans. There really haven't been a lot of blowout wins because teams have said, well, hey, we can run the ball. Why not just keep running the ball? And then the Texans are surprisingly good in the red zone on defense. They're a top 10 red zone defense in terms of touchdowns allowed in the red zone. So it's a quintessential bend but don't break defense. They bend, they let you into the red zone, but then they're actually pretty good at holding teams to field goals. So here's one more clip with Deshaun Watson and Brian Baldinger.
Full house backfield with a little wheel to the outside.
Yeah.
So are your options similar to a normal naked where naked, take the flat, right? Take the flat if it's there all the time. If you have a little time, now you peek that wheel if there's an opportunity.
Yeah, I can peek the wheel.
Basically, all you're going to do is overload the defense here with both guys coming out. And so the first guy is going to draw the coverage, and the second guy is going to go uncovered.
Yeah, so this is good stuff. I'm going to show you a good clip, by the way, of something that Josh Allen does really well. That, again, this is something that we didn't really see out of Deshaun. Look at the attention to detail, the ability to really hold on to the ball and wait until the last minute to make a decision on the zone read. This is the type of stuff that just really screws defenses up. I mean, look, everybody is deceived there. They all run with the running back, and then Josh Allen just trucks his way on down the field. And look, I mean, Deshaun's capable of doing that. It's an attention to detail. Brock Osweiler, who you'll recall went up to the Browns not too long ago, one thing he had actually said that was surprising to me when he got up there. Look, in Brock, it might have been a little bit of sour grapes, but Brock made the point when he was in Cleveland that he liked that they were getting back to him working on the basics every day, and that was something that he'd had in Denver, and they didn't necessarily do in Houston. And yes, Brock had reasons or motivations to maybe snipe at Bill O'Brien a little bit, but I do think that O'Brien, it falls into the category of coaches that really want to out-scheme you. And I think there are other coaches who are execution-based coaches. And sure, they'd love to out-scheme you, but first and foremost, they want to get the execution right. And that's where the Kubiak-Shanahan tree, sometimes it gets a little too typecast as, it's zone running, it's West Coast passing concepts. Yes, that's true. But honestly, a big part of it is just the philosophy of running the ball effectively, using that, I hate to say to set up the pass, because it's a little bit more nuanced than just run, pass. It's a matter of making those two elements complement each other, the run game and the pass game, by making the run blocking and the pass blocking look exactly the same, to fool safeties in that way. And that extends to whatever type of run, whether it's play action with a zone, with a power and counter blocking look, or whether it's a zone coupled with a boot. They want to deceive you and make everything look the same. But they also, and this is what I wanted to bring up when Deshaun was talking about how, hey, it's great because the running backs will get 2, 3, 4 yards sometimes. One of the other clips, he said 2 or 3 yards, not 3 or 4 yards. No. Kubiak-Shanahan teams want to lead the league in big runs. That means your wide receivers are blocking downfield. You are figuring out ways to get yardage in huge chunks. Be greedy, because running 3 yards at a clip does not lead to huge scoring deluges. It leads to a lot of first downs, but then something stymies you, because after a sack, all of a sudden, we saw it in Houston, you're still trying to run for those 3 yards, and it's 2nd and 15, and that's when people get pissed. So being greedy is good in some respects, and I think it's going to be good for Deshaun Watson. If we look at the over-unders for Deshaun Watson, I think he goes over on the yards just because I think the Texans, who have done a relatively good job, at least relative to where they are as a defense, they've done a good job of limiting some big plays, but I think Deshaun hits them because of the play action effect for some big gains in this game. So I think they go over the yardage. For attempts, I'll say they go under on the attempts. I think Kevin Stefanski is going to stay true to the core tenets of the Kubiak-Shanahan system, and they try to win it with the run if they can. I haven't even looked at the weather yet, but if it's foul weather, then for sure under on the attempts. So completions, I would probably take the under as well. Touchdown passes, 1.5. I would take the under on that. So I think I said I was going to take the over on all of these, but I said, like I said, they're gonna run the ball, but with some big chunks in the passing games. Interceptions 1. I'll go back to Mike Vick, a guy who didn't shy away from throwing interceptions in his career. And in his first couple games back as a starter after almost a 4-year layoff, 4 years he was almost off, threw 0 interceptions in his first 2 games. I didn't even look at the third. Maybe he did by the third one. Rush yards 34.5. I would go over on that for the same reasons that I'm telling you. He's not going to have as many attempts as it looks like right there. So that's a pretty healthy yards per attempt I'm giving you. If I'm saying he's going to go under on the pass attempts, but he's going to have 209 yards. So let's say he had 30 passing attempts. He's got 7 yards per pass attempts there. I think it would be a lot of dink and dunking coupled with 1 or 2 big plays. And look, I expect the Cleveland Browns victory. That's not a huge revelation. I do think they'll cover the spread. The Texans are a feisty bunch when they get to the red zone, but this Cleveland Browns offense is better than advertised, and I think as well as Jacoby Brissett has played and as admirable as he's been in this role, he's just simply no Deshaun Watson. So rust or not, this is a poor matchup for the Houston Texans versus the Cleveland Browns. I want to thank everybody. If you enjoyed this, go ahead and hit subscribe. I'm here on YouTube for the long run. I enjoy it more, and I get to maybe have a little bit more freedom in what I get to do. So thanks a lot for joining us, everybody. Have a great weekend.